Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ciena webinar, sponsored by the Tenny Group. We are pleased to have you here, and we're pleased to have our friends from Tenny Group here as well. You are going to get a front row seat in a master class on business administration today. The one that we're covering today is growing through acquisition and protecting business value. Great topic, and kind of summarizes a lot of threads that we've talked about throughout this series that we've done with the Tenny Group. We'll talk a little bit about that at the end. With that, I would love to introduce Spencer Tenny, who's the president and CEO of the Tenny Group, and Davis Looney, who is the strategic advisor at the Tenny Group, who are going to take us through our topic today. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Spencer and Davis, and I will see you guys on the other side for Q&A.
Thank you, Hal. So 14 years ago, I was having a conversation with a buyer that was in a negotiation to acquire one of our companies that we represented for sale. And it was getting not really contentious, but we were kind of reaching a little bit of an impasse. And our team presented what I thought was a pretty creative proposal that would meet the needs and the goals of both parties. But the buyer just flatly said, Spencer, I am not going to do a deal structured like that. And then he kind of caught himself and he said, let me back up. I would prefer to not do a deal like that. But if you can show me how I can make money, I will keep an open mind. Now, that decision for that buyer right there to back up and to have an open mind about how to expand his overall growth strategy through some different plays in his acquisition playbook. Fast forward 14 years, we ended up doing over a dozen acquisitions with that same company and dramatically transformed the value of that business, trajectory, their competitive position, everything. And that's to their credit. That's not our credit. But I think that kind of segues into what we're going to talk about today in this climate as far as growing through acquisition and protecting business value. You're going to hear some themes that we hope will encourage and inspire you, ultimately through simplicity, through openness, and just a little creativity. A lot of amazing things can happen in your business. And so I want to turn it over to Davis. Davis, can you help us understand a little bit about why now? Why are we here? What's specific about what's happening in the market that we will be discussing this topic right now?
I appreciate it. Well, definitely going to talk about why are we here, but as you kind of alluded to, why now is definitely timely as well. Was talking to Hal before this. We closed 2 deals the end of last week. We're representing 15 current clients on the sell side right now. And so we're seeing these conversations play out in a lot of different ways and seeing a lot of buyers, really take advantage of this time. And so why are we here in terms of these bullet points? We'll say that the first one there, surging expenses and surging pricing equals flat business valuation. And I think that most of us have seen this to some extent right now, that, a lot of rate increases are available, but we're also seeing a lot of rising expenses, not just this year, but year over year, as is seen in the insurance market and driver pay increases, and all this, the other expenses that are required to operate the business. And so how can we find ways through acquisitions to minimize those expenses to allow the actual valuation of the business to grow in turn with the revenue increases we're seeing as well? The driver shortage is definitely causing fewer reliable growth options. So, traditionally, organic growth was a really feasible way to look for growth. But as we've mentioned in a few of these webinars recently, most people are saying, I can go get all of the freight in the world, but I can't find the drivers to service it. So if you can't grow organically right now, then we're seeing a lot of people utilize acquisitions as a way to give themselves access to a greater driver pool and find growth in a different way. And so, again, as we're representing the sellers right now, and as our current clients, and what's been true traditionally is there is an aging owner demographic within the trucking industry. And traditionally 70 to 100% of our clients' wealth are going to be tied to their business. And so if you're listening to this and you're probably some level of that's true of you today, and if you're not looking to call it quits and right into the next chapter of your career today, then there's probably some ways that we're going to talk about that you can actually protect that value that's been built in the business thus far through acquisitions that we hope will leave you guys prepared to consider some new options. And so goals for today. we're going to debunk some myths. We're going to debunk some common objections we hear as to why or why not people should consider some acquisitions. We're going to share some best practices that we see often on the buy side when acquirers are actually getting deals done and getting them done well and efficiently. We're going to examine some case studies to kind of see how that plays out in a couple of different ways. We're going to explore some of the cost benefits associated with specific items within different parts of an acquisition. And again, as I mentioned, we're going to hopefully create some confidence for you guys just to say, hey, I think I'm leaving with a little better idea of what's going to be required of me to go, take the next steps to consider and pursue some potential acquisition opportunities, going forward. And so we've intentionally kind of left some space here at the end to take some Q&A. And so there's going to be some participation encouraged, not required, in the webinar here. But at the end, we would love some Q&A as well. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Spencer as we jump into the Shark Tank.
The Shark Tank, one of my favorite shows on all of television, NBC. I believe this show should be required education for junior high, high school students, and college because of the practical tools it gives future entrepreneurs to make great decisions when it comes to investing and acquiring and selling businesses. So we're going to have a little exercise here in a moment. Like I said, Davis, we'll take your participation and we'll give you a chance to co-invest with Mr. Looney on an amazing trucking acquisition opportunity that I'm about to outline for you. So let's get right to it. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to just take a glimpse of your future right here. This is USA America Intermodal Transportation, and maybe the best transportation company in America. And so let me break down the facts, and then I'm going to give you a chance to invest or co-invest with Mr. Looney in this deal. So right off the bat, we got $28 million in annual revenue. This is intermodal trucking, $3 million in adjusted EBITDA. That's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. 20-year history in the business. Reason for selling: I got to retire. I'm getting up there. I'm ready to play some golf. I'm ready for somebody else to kind of deal with some of the growing challenges. And hey, my dreams have already come true owning this businesses, and I want to share my blessings with those of you in this audience. So with that, Sharks, who wants to be in the intermodal business with Davis Looney? Let's hear it, folks.
That is a phenomenal presentation you just gave there.
I don't disagree.
Every one of us Sharks over here is wild. But I think we're going to have to ask a little more of you here real quickly. So I'm going to ask for a little participation here from the audience. You see a couple of these offer structures that we have laid out here, but in order to come to a decision on which route we want to go, I think there's some additional questions that we might want to ask of you in order to decide which path we're going to go. So if you guys are willing, if you want to utilize that Q&A option down there to run some questions by us, we'll see if we can learn a little bit more about the business that might influence our decision here. And if you guys don't, I will pretend that you did and ask some questions anyways. So great question off the top here. How many drivers are associated with business?
There is 150 drivers.
Okay, that's definitely relevant information. What about customer concentration? How much of your revenue is tied to maybe your top 3 customers?
Well, all of it, 80% in the number 1, and then 10 and 10 on number 2 and number 3. Okay,
that's a pretty high ratio there, but good to know. Definitely relevant to our decision-making process. What do you think the wholesale value of your equipment is?
Well, I think it's probably worth $25 million. I'm going to cut you a deal, like it said, 16.5 million, but that's what I'm going to go with.
Okay. And, safety record. Is there anything we should be worried about in that regard? Any potential claims out there that could impact my company if I acquire you?
Not a one. Perfect safety record.
Love to hear that. Love to hear that. Okay. What about driver increases. When was the last time you increased the pay of your drivers?
Well, I got to tell you, my guys love our business so much. We haven't had a driver pay increase in 3 years. So I don't think you have anything to worry about there.
That's amazing that you still have drivers. I'm gonna have to learn more about that, but that's definitely raising some concern.
Well,
Okay.
I'm here to teach.
Do you have any sort of safety equipment on the trucks, either forward facing cameras or driver facing cameras, anything like that?
We've got all the good things that all the good insurance folks want us to have.
Which is probably why you have those good safety scores. Okay,
Right.
check it out.
That's the best of it.
What about 10-year experience of your management team? How's that look for you? Is everyone new, or is you got a strong team behind you?
Well, I'm going to be honest. I have great people, but most of the heavy lifting, that's what I've been doing. I'm happy to provide support for the new ownership, but in terms of true responsibility, the great people, but I have not historically provided them a lot of authority.
Okay. And the revenue you presented, 28 million there, is there any new customers or any new contracts associated with that maybe isn't reflected in the trailing 12 months, but could be?
You know what? I'm glad that you asked that. I just personally negotiated a deal that's going to increase our sales about 40% in 2022.
Okay. Is it, you have anything that can validate that? Does that hit is it a contract? Has it hit the P&L yet?
No, it has not hit the P&L, but I do things the old fashioned way. And, but you can count on that.
It's going to be tough to count on that if you don't have a little more than that, but noted. Okay. Appreciate that. And, where are you guys located?
The West Coast.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's going to give us a good start right there. A lot of great questions. And, we definitely have some people that have tuned into some of our stuff before, which I do appreciate. So that said, I'll give you guys a chance to make an offer here and see which way we're going to go. When you see a business like this, are we going to go a wholesale value of the equipment? Are we going to go, 4 times EBITDA with 3 million of that tied to some seller financing, 3 EBITDA cash, all cash at close, fair market value of equipment plus $15K per driver that stays for 1 year? Or I want nothing to do with trucking, I'm out. If that's you, you're probably on the wrong webinar, but love to see some answers come through there. And I'll pass it over to you, Spencer.
And I would also invite anyone that wants to include a better offer. I would welcome that as well.
I'm not seeing any better offers right now, but it looks like we're seeing a lot of equipment value plus drivers come across.
I'm seeing a lot of potential I'm out as well. Well, listen, guys, I hope that this is fun. The purpose of why we do this is number one, it is to have a little fun. It's to challenge us to think a little bit about, because if you notice with every question that we ask, it changed the risk associated with the transaction. 40% increase, that gets us a little bit more excited. But then if that's not contractually agreed to, maybe that's not as exciting as we thought it was. Or if we have customer concentration, what if we would have told you that the customer concentration, that all of those had 5-year guaranteed contracts associated with that revenue? It changes the risk. So this is just kind of an introduction in terms of how the risk around a potential acquisition can affect structure, the way that we value it, and the way if we determine if it's a fit or not. So I got to compliment you. There's some amazing questions coming through this deal. So thanks for your participation. That kind of segues when we get to the Shark Tank. The people that typically do the best in the Shark Tank are the ones that, in the real Shark Tank, they're the ones that are administering the best practices. And doing this business as a company with a firm last 48 years, we've seen some just truly amazing business professionals excel in the area of mergers and acquisitions. And we've observed, what are the things that differentiate these folks? Why is it easy for them? Why are they getting results that others are not? And really, these are some of the practices that we've observed about what they're doing. They're very simple, and they're things that you can do immediately, and we're happy to share them with you. So the first one here is establish what you want and why. Quick story, had a very dear industry friend about 5 years ago come to me and say, hey, Spencer, I've got a new vision for my business. I'm super inspired. I want to go from 400 trucks to 700 trucks in 5 years. I want to put the hammer down. I know that I probably should do this through acquisitions. You're my guy. Let's go get it done. So I said, hey, I'm flattered. So may I ask you a couple questions? Sure. So I said, how is your life going to get better with 700 trucks versus what it is today with 400 trucks? And he says, I hadn't really got that far. I just love trucks. And so that simple question allowed him to kind of like step back and say, hey, before I go out and start throwing debt around and disrupting my balance sheet, I probably need to have a little bit more focus on why I'm doing what I'm doing. In contrast to that, I had another client that had about 100 million in sales, and they were in the liquid bulk side, had some oil and gas side of their business, but had grown very weary of having the exposure in the oil and gas. And so they came to the Tenney Group and said, hey, listen, we want to continue to grow, but our strategy, the reason why we're uncomfortable with our level of exposure in the oil and gas side. We want to grow, but we want to grow specifically in the liquid bulk and the petro side of what we're doing, so that we can shift the level of risk and exposure that we have doing that. And we've assessed our toolbox of what we have in terms of financial resources. We've done some deals before. The pocket where we really want to be in is probably in this 12 to 16 million in revenue. That's a deal that we can really integrate well and efficiently. So you go do this, not only it's going to create cash flow for us, it's also going to increase our value when we hope to exit in 5 years. So very different contrast in terms of the preparation when someone's going to the acquisition market. So and there's a reason why this person got immediate results, because they had the focus, they had a clear vision about goals. More specifically, they knew the impact that they wanted to create. You can go about creating impact in a variety of ways, but the key is, what are you trying to do? He wanted to de-risk, and he also wanted to prepare for an exit 5 years from that standpoint. And he knew he needed to increase the value of the business. And this was part of that story. So very key, very simple, but very key as a foundation to setting the rest of the things in motion. This next thing, assess your acquisition toolbox. I teased this a minute ago. Davis, just what are the 5 to 6 different things that are typically in the toolbox that a lot of folks kind of sometimes forget that they have at their disposal to go use acquisitions as a tool in the toolkit?
Yeah. And I think the goal is just to understand what's available to you on the front end. And so, equipment financing is definitely one of those, utilizing existing lines of credit, seller financing, maybe some sort of shared risk scenario where, you can use an earnout as a portion to, de-risk a transaction. And then obviously just the cash you have available. But with equipment prices being where they are, if there is equipment attached to a deal right now, you can get a lot done that wasn't previously available in terms of equipment financing a few years ago to kind of allow you to do more at the table right now. So that's exciting, and we've seen that play out in several different ways recently. The next point there, we're talking about maximizing quality at bats. I think we'll try to toot our own horn here real fast and just own it. But that's probably 80% of our work is going to be on the sales side. And so that said, we're always 80% of the time, we're advocating for the best interest of the seller. That doesn't mean that we don't keep a very clear understanding with as many buyers as we can as to what it is they're looking for. Because if we're representing a seller, we want to send that opportunity to the right people and do that efficiently. And we want to make sure that if we're sending something to a buyer, they know that they should open it, because we've pre-vetted it to some extent to say, based on geography, based on, the trailer type, commodities hauled, whatever it is that we know buyers are interested in, this matches and checks some of those boxes. So it's going to be worth them getting their eyes on it. And so to the same extent, whatever legal influencers, advisors within the transportation space, insurance advisors, people that are going to have a pulse on what deals are coming to market, keeping a running tab on, with them as to making sure they're aware of what it is you're looking for, and to, encourage them to bring that to you. That allows you to maximize your time by looking at the deals that are right for you, and less time on deals that have nothing to do with the business you're currently operating, but it's both considered trucking. So I'm sure with this crowd, if you're intermodal, you probably get hit up with deals all the time that have nothing to do with what it is you're actually trying to accomplish as a business. And so trying to maximize the deals that matter, getting those in front of you is a key. So especially when it comes to this next point, making offers.
And I want to add, just in terms, if you think about it this way, it's certainly we have friends in the industry, and that without even trying, they're getting 50 deal opportunities brought like unsolicited. They're just bringing it to them through a variety of different ways. And I had a conversation with one of these individuals, and with all that deal flow, they didn't make an offer on one of those situations. So they took all the time to process these transactions to acquire 0 companies. That's an inefficient way to do business. We released an article last month in our newsletter called 3 Signs That Your Acquisition Effort is Dysfunctional. And this is one of the key signs. If you're looking at a lot of deals and you're not making offers, it's probably because you haven't mobilized key influencers in your circle of influence. You haven't told them what it is that you're looking for and why. And when you condition them to bring in the right deals, you'll screen fewer deals and close a lot more deals. And that's the best practice. So the next one is making the offers. And I can't even tell you how important this is. Some people like get to the point and they kind of freeze, like, oh my gosh, I might be able to get this deal done. What am I supposed to do? How formal does the offer need to be? The answer is not very formal at all. In fact, it's really more about speed. The famous philosopher that we've quoted a few times, in this series, Ricky Bobby, if you ain't first, you're last. And I think that's the whole deal, is getting an offer first is a very meaningful deal, because so many people do this badly. They start with due diligence, waste a ton of time and never present an offer. What if your efforts, you take 1, maybe 2 weeks to just conceptually understand the deal, present through what we would call an indication of interest, which is a non-binding, very elementary looking proposal, but effective. Seller understands it, and you'll know very quickly whether or not you're going to have a deal. The other part about making offers is this: it's the fastest way to accelerate your overall competency in doing deals, because when you make an offer, you're likely to get a counter offer. And that just helps you get more awareness about how to structure deals based on how the seller responds. So make offers, get in the game and make offers. And then lastly, I think this is probably the secret sauce above all, based on the practical elements of deal making. So Davis, tell us a little about why this is so important.
Yeah, I'd say, keeping the door open. So say you make an offer and a seller is not willing to accept it. We've seen buyers respond in 2 ways, where they just shut down or get mad and say, well, that's it, and not some kind words. Caught myself there. And then we've had other people respond humbly and say, hey, I understand, that's what the best we can do today. And, if things change, if something changes on our end or something changes in terms of your business or your motivation, then we welcome you to give us a call, and we'd love to continue the conversation at that point. And oftentimes we've seen that seller will hold out and say, well, come back a couple months later and say, well, actually what I thought the market would deliver, wasn't made available. And it turns out in hindsight, that was actually a solid offer made to me there. And because that seller handled that with grace and humility, then, the buyer, that seller was willing to come back to him and continue the conversation and ultimately get a deal done with him. So, just being able to handle these conversations and not be able to take a no as a never is one way you can definitely create some more opportunities for yourself. And so as we talk about all these, what we're really trying to say is we're trying to create deal efficiency. We're trying to say, hey, find the places where what you're capable of, what you're looking for, and do it in a way that allows you to maintain solid relationships in the process. But there is one thing that is key to the process, and that's when you do find portions of a deal that are deal breakers for you. You've got to run. You got to get away. That's actually a shot of me on a run yesterday. But knowing when to say no and knowing when to kind of hold to the time and the effort you've put in to kind of decide, hey, these are the things we're trying to accomplish with these deals, and not get distracted by a compelling story or something that someone's trying to make a strong case for. Knowing and sticking to your guns and knowing when to run away, again, agreeably, is definitely key.
So all this, in terms of, we kind of previewed why are we doing this right now, but I think that the main kind of thesis is right now is that moving forward, in order to be an industry leader, it's going to be very difficult to either get to that position or hold that position without integrating acquisitions into some way into what you're doing. It's just because the constraints around organic growth are so significant, it's critical for you to be able to function in some capacity, and not that it's going to be your whole growth strategy, but it should play some role in what you're doing. And so what we want you to do is to be equipped with an approach that allows you to be effective. So we talked about the best practices. So what are some of the approaches from a mindset when people are looking at deals? What are they doing? How does it affect the way that they go about considering a deal? And so the next 3 slides, we're going to kind of dive into that. So Davis, we talk about what can we learn from private equity groups, PEGs, as they buy? What's significant about that? And what can we glean from that in order to be more effective acquirers in the trucking space?
Traditionally, a private equity group is looking for 15 to 30% return on equity. And so, as they are evaluating a deal, they have some goalposts that they're trying to say, hey, can we accomplish this from the get-go? And that's one of the things that, a private equity group typically has a hold time associated with the deal. And so they know what they're trying to accomplish from the get-go, and they're able to, scrub metrics to see how they're able to extract that or not, and tend to be pretty efficient in doing that. They're also looking at how much new cash flow is available. So, what can they do to grow the business post-acquisition? How much cushion do I need? Kind of assess some of the risk associated with this. And what's the cost of us not doing that deal? And so those are questions they're looking at to say, hey, if we're trying to make a turn here in the next 5 to 7 years, potentially, then we've got to be pretty confident that this deal is going to deliver these types of results. And here's a couple of the things we commonly see on the private equity side that they're assessing on the front end. Spencer, what are some other things you've noticed as well?
And I'll provide an example. So we were helping one of our buy-side advisory clients look at a deal, and our team, it's very simple. If you don't have the ability in-house, or you don't have the resources, this can be challenging, but if you have the right people doing this, whether you're subcontracting or what, it's not a big deal. And what I mean by that is that you can look at the deal in terms of its structure and be able to clearly understand what's the return on equity, just in the same way as you would look at a return on investment if you're doing a real estate deal. You should be doing that in the same way with a trucking deal. And you should also be able to efficiently calculate what is your after debt service cash flow going to look like. So the application for that, when we were servicing the buy side, is that, okay, our client wanted a variety of different support, specifically on kind of the architecture of these offers that we would do. So we would put 4 offers together. They provided, hey, I want to have a minimum return on equity this. In order for me to feel comfortable with the deal flow or with the deal, I need to have X amount of cash flow after debt service, just so that if I have a dip in performance or some kind of crazy regulation disrupts my performance, I know that I've got some cushion to deal with the bumps in the road. And so what we were able to do, put 4 different deal structure iterations, show the return on equity, show the cash flow, and then our client in 5 minutes could say, well, I want to do this one. And you can see in terms of confidence, and that's not Tenny Group, that's just data. So what I'm saying, when we're talking about thinking about a PEG, you should be relying on data so that you can confidently engage in a deal and know exactly what you are going to get. And so you don't take risks that you don't need to, but also you don't lose a deal based on a gut feeling. Like you back it up with data so that if you need to stretch or if you want to stretch, you can defer back to your minimum expectation from return on equity and also that cash flow cushion, and feel 100% confident that if the seller accepts your deal, then you're going to have a winner. That's the main takeaway.
All right. So this next one here, if we're going to examine the cost justification, benefits, and how does this deal protect my business value? So as we kind of alluded to earlier, with inflation of costs, what is the cost of not growing right now, and the potential risk of the expenses associated with currently operating the business increasing at a rate that outpaces the revenue increases that you're seeing? We were talking about this earlier. We're seeing a lot of people that when they look at their top line revenue this year, they're saying, well, man, like I'm growing at a tremendous rate, but they're actually hauling less, and the expenses that they're incurring are growing. And typically what happens when the market shifts, it's not that expenses drop, it's that the rates drop. And so what can we do right now to actually protect ourselves for when inevitably trucking being a cyclical industry do see that shift take place? And so also asking, how does this insulate me from dilution? what future expenses can be avoided. Those are definitely things we're seeing that people can use an acquisition to actually create scale for themselves in a way that allows them to compete for better lending rates, to decrease their insurance to an extent, to actually weed out some of their potentially more problematic drivers to keep their insurance rates down. Different ways that we're saying this deal can actually protect us. And one thing we did allude to earlier, to an extent, one of the underlying drivers of a lot of acquisitions right now is just talent. If you're in a business that is highly dependent on you, and you can make an acquisition that allows you to bring some strong management in around you to allow them to take on some of the roles and the hats that you're wearing, that's a strong way to protect your business through whatever it is that lies ahead.
No, 100%. And I think that just, what we're really getting at is that it's very difficult without growth to protect what you currently have. That's a fact. And that's been true for the last, 2-4 years, as far as what's happening. Chalk it up to these nuclear verdicts, chalk it up to whatever, whatever you want to. It's just very difficult. So the answers are accept the dilution of the value of the stock that you have in your own business, or be proactive about doing something different. And that doesn't mean the wholesale solution or prescription for change is acquisitions, but comparatively speaking, acquisitions side by side is one of the most dynamic things that you can do to materially affect what is chipping away at what you currently own from a business value standpoint. I think that is something, whether some people aren't motivated by, I need to grow or I want to expand. The reality is where we're at right now is that acquisitions will likely play a key role if you want to continue to be in this industry, and just protecting what you have, just holding the line. And so I think that's the main deal, to feel good about, increase in pay across the board. And this is not to discourage anybody. This is just like, hey, this is a beautiful, wonderful industry. But as we say all the time, it's also a very unforgiving industry. So what we're just saying is, in order to offset these things, we need growth, we need scale. So if you're looking at protecting the business value, it could be, hey, I'm really weak in this lane. What allows me to protect my business value is this other trucking company allows me to complement where I'm weak. And so that's going to create more efficiency. It's going to allow me to protect what I have and what I've worked so hard to build.
Understood. Our final point here, where does this deal create business value? And got a couple of bullet points here. Reducing customer concentration. We alluded to that earlier, with the deal that was proposed, 80% of their revenue is tied to the top customer. And so, that person, if they turned on the acquisition hat, could have made an acquisition to drastically decrease the amount of their revenue tied to that one customer, ultimately de-risking their business as a whole from a drastic change from that customer's business. Increasing lane density and utilization. So being able to create efficiency for your business through buying people that are running similar lanes, being able to fill your backhauls more efficiently, to maybe utilize some of your equipment in different routes that are more profitable for you. That's ways we see that happen a lot. More volume equals an increased multiplier. This is something that private equity groups have figured out very well, is that, if you are sitting at, a 4 to 5 times multiple available for your company, and, the sub 50 million in revenue range, and you can scale yourself up over the $200 million in revenue range. And that's, just for the sake of examples, there's going to be different multiples available to you at each one of those stages. And so if you can make an acquisition now, knowing you can buy it at 4 times, but you're going to exit at 6, there's just a creative value created there. And then, as we mentioned, the upgraded talent and reducing dependence, that's value created for you when, a potential exit is on the line for you later. A buyer's going to look at that in the same way as you would look at it as a buyer, to say, okay, that's going to de-risk this transaction for me. And just reducing driver recruitment costs. Spencer, you were mentioning a story about how we saw this play out the other day.
Yeah, we were representing one of our deals, and we were talking to a buyer, and they were new to acquisitions, and we understood the value that our company brought to them from just addressing their current ongoing struggle with recruiting and retaining drivers. So I just asked him, I said, how much, let's just say in the last 60 days, how much have you paid towards driver recruitment? And this was a smaller deal, probably around 12, 15 million. He said, well, in terms of gross sales, he said, I paid $25,000 in the last 6 months. I've recruited one driver. One driver. So naturally, when we're talking about a deal, even if we're just talking about the assets plus a per driver payment, it's very easy to understand like how to get these efficiencies very fast with a fraction of the hassles that we're currently dealing with. So not only are you reducing the cost of the recruitment per driver, you're getting back all of the time that you're currently devoting to that practice that is so inefficient. So I think that's the main things as far as like examining the cost. If you're looking at deals, sometimes what gets you to the table, why you might be acquiring, maybe you lost a customer, maybe that your insurance premiums went up by 20% and you have to figure out a way to offset that. Well, you might not be able to offset that just by a blend of new risks through the two companies. It could be through another way, like the lane density that Davis talked about, or through, just eliminating the driver recruitment expense for a year, basically. So there's a lot of different ways to skin that cat. Our goal for you is to ask the right questions as you're processing these deals. And there's a really good chance that you're going to land on something that's going to allow you to advance your position.
Yeah. And I'm probably going to have my PowerPoint privileges removed from me going forward for this, but I did miss a slide here on debunking myths that I think it might be worth us going to check back on, because I think that's important. And hopefully we did kind of expel some of these myths in the process, but I got a little excited and I skipped right over it. So, in terms of the myths that we're hearing, if it's for sale, something must be wrong with it. I think we've hopefully addressed that to an extent. There's a lot of ways that you can find a business that is going to bring value to your business. A majority of our clients are going to be people that have built a strong business, but they just want to transition to that next season of life. And there's a lot of value that can come with helping them accomplish that. Alternatively, we have a handful of clients that they're younger guys and women who have created a business and say, hey, I've created something special here. I love it. I know I don't have what it takes to continue to scale it to where I think it can go. And so we think, an exit would be in our best interest to allow the business to continue moving forward to what we think it could be. This other next one, going through an acquisition is too risky. I guess our argument would be, well, there's a lot of risk associated with not making an acquisition, especially right now, and a lot of risk associated with just, hoping your drivers are going to be here this time next year, or that, the competitive landscape is going to remain the way it is right now. That's, there's risk on every side of this business, as I think we're all familiar with. I don't have money to pay for an acquisition. I think we've talked about that, and understanding your tool belt to kind of see what it is that you can do to accomplish an acquisition without possibly going out of pocket on any of your cash. And then, I have my own problems. I'll need to acquire someone else's. I would agree with that. I think we all probably have our own problems and we don't need anyone else's. But as Spencer just kind of alluded to, I think there's some ways through acquisitions we can actually use an acquisition as a prescription to our problems, rather than actually viewing it as, just the potential to, acquire someone else's. Any thoughts there, Spencer?
Yeah, I think, and just kind of as we're just overall concluding thoughts as we're kind of, wrapping this up, I want to reiterate when we got back to the very beginning of like the best practices, the people that are winning in this area, they're not necessarily the most sophisticated, and they're honestly not the most experienced either. The characteristics of the people that are winning in the acquisition game right now, they keep it simple, they keep it efficient, and they stay humble. And that's it. And I think that if you're doing those three things and you're getting in the game, the opportunities for you to create transformative new business value, but also personal wealth, are profound. And I just want to encourage you that your peers have done this, probably the peers that you think are a fraction of your ability are doing this. And I just want to encourage you that, winning the future, you don't have to do this, but this is one thing that you're capable of. And it's one of the fastest ways to create distance between you and the competition and to make life in trucking a lot more fun. So I hope that this has provoked some thoughts. We, as David said, we want to leave some space here. Happy to answer anything related to this topic, or if you've been tuning into the whole series here, feel free to kind of get some of those questions back on the table too, because that might be valuable for the group as well.
Well, Jens, that was great. You had us wrapped, but also laughing along with you over here in at IANA HQ. So thanks for that. It's always good to learn something and get a good chuckle along the way. I think it helps the info stick. Want to go ahead and dive right in to the Q&A because we've got some questions here, and there's one that kind of jumps right to, I think, a topic or a question that's probably on the top of a lot of people's minds, which is, how active do you expect the level of M&A transactions to remain post-COVID, whatever post-COVID really is going to mean?
Well, we're already seeing that right now. We're going to be up 50% over what we were from a volume of transactions from 2020. Now, some of that is because the last 6 months of 2020, people pressed pause. They didn't know what was going on. Like, they didn't know what to do. So some of that is what should have happened in 2020, and it's pushing into this year. But with all the pressure, with all the strain on the supply chain, a lot of, to answer the question, a lot. It's gonna continue to increase because you can't get drivers, you can't get trucks, and the expenses are going up. So the only way to offset that, it's not the only way, but one of the more obvious ways to address that quickly and effectively is through an acquisition. And interest rates continue to be almost nothing. So the environment as it is right now, you have pressure, you have quality of life issues, you have an aging population that's affecting the interest in selling. And then you throw in optimal financing and absolutely ridiculously cheap debt. There's going to be a lot of change within the competitive landscape within trucking logistics.
Yeah, and I'll add to that as well. Just, what was true before the pandemic is still true now in terms of aging owner demographic as well. I mean, there's just by necessity, there's going to be acquisition opportunities on the market because, a lot of baby boomers are looking at entering into retirement, and that's just going to, if they want to do that, as we mentioned, there's going to have to be an exit. And so just from seller inventory in that regard, that's going to drive, transactions, just pandemic or not.
Yeah, and I do think one of the things that we're seeing is there's some interesting uptick in just the general overall awareness of logistics, interest in logistics, and people with some interesting ideas that want to find out, why can't I jump in here and maybe solve some of these problems? So I think, got like Ryan Peterson over at Flexport, who's a young guy who got into logistics for that very reason and has grown by leaps and bounds. And I think that's something to watch as we transition from the baby boomer / Gen X crowd into that millennial crowd of who are starting to buy businesses, is that different approach to business, which really lines up very well with that sort of ethic that you're talking about, how to be a good sort of purchaser. A couple other questions here. What are some of the avoidable mistakes that you guys see from the buyer's perspective?
Where do we begin? Quite honestly, I think that the most common mistake that's extremely avoidable is asking for too much too soon from a confidentiality, just confidential information in general. What's true is we did a study on the last 5 years of all the offers that our firm has generated on hundreds of deals. 88% of those have come from people who are already invested in the trucking space. They're either regional or national strategic, or they're a private equity backed strategic or private equity backed public or whatever. The point is they understand trucking. Yep. So there's no need to spend and to share an exorbitant amount of information to teach someone who already knows about trucking. Usually what will suffice to satisfy a buyer's investment thesis is a one-page teaser. And I think the sellers can actually help mold the way this looks by just understanding how they can get around this, just to make it more efficient for everyone, which is to say, hey, here's the one-page teaser. If we want to go further, I'm happy to answer a limited amount of questions at that point. But at some point, pretty early, we're going to need to understand are we in the same universe on the economics? And once buyers realize that that can be facilitated literally within 10 to 14 days after looking at an opportunity, they'll never spend 6 months doing pre-due diligence on a deal again. It's a complete waste of time.
That makes a load of sense. You get better at it, and you refine it. And I think, you touched on getting that one sheeter together as a part of your process in one of our previous sessions that we did. Here's an interesting question from the 3PL perspective, which is there a formula or process used to evaluate a non-asset based 3PL transportation company? So we talked a little bit about, the wholesale value for assets, but when we're talking about a 3PL in the brokerage
Sure.
for space.
Davis, you want to take a
I mean,
stab
just
at
at a broad stroke, I think we're typically seeing those deals summarized by multiples of EBITDA. Just as we kind of alluded to earlier, typically on the asset light side or the non-asset side, that's going to be a higher multiple that's traditionally available for a asset heavy company. Depending on size, for some of these smaller 3PLs, we could see in the 4 to 6 range for a smaller one, and then once you get up towards 10 million in EBITDA, the 8 to 10s plus start becoming more relevant, and then once you get above that to 15 to 20 million in EBITDA, 12 plus is potentially available for you. The thing that's valuable there is that it's really easy to understand the financials on a 3PL. There's not the CapEx required that's traditionally scary for a lot of PEs, especially. And so you tend to see valuations creep up there. At the same time, on the smaller end, could be harder to get some stuff done because if a lot of your customers are generated through 1 or 2 sales professionals that may or may not have non-compete, then there's a lot of risk in taking that on and saying, well, what am I really buying if all the relationships are tied to 1 or 2 key people? Spencer, what would you add to that?
No, I would just a broader commentary. We did an M&A report, kind of a review of 2020 and kind of a forecast of 2021. And as part of that, we shared how valuation trends for your asset-light companies had been on a 7-year increase as a multiple of EBITDA. And so that's an extremely long time to have an upward curve as far as valuations. And even as recently in the last, we've probably, people on here, you've probably seen third-party articles from very credible sources talking about how valuations continue to be extremely aggressive on the asset-light side, the brokerage. And so I do think that will normalize at some point. It's important for people here to kind of understand that. It may not be tomorrow, may not even be next year, but like I said, 7 years without kind of normalizing, that would be, to go beyond that would be unlikely, in my opinion. So I think that's important to consider. But the other part of it, just when people are placing, in addition to the volume, when they're looking at asset side, they're also looking at the efficiency and they're looking at gross margin. So we'll see when we're evaluating companies, we're paying specific attention to that, because we'll see ranges anywhere from 14 to 22%. And if someone's getting 22% gross margin on the same type of brokerage revenue as somebody over here, and they're only doing 14%, they're obviously going to attract a much higher valuation from an efficiency standpoint. So those are things that we look at.
That makes loads of sense. You sort of touched on some of the valuations and the kind of the levels in that answer. In terms of other trends that you guys are seeing for things in your market that are specific to acquisitions, anything that you're seeing trend wise?
Well, I'll take a shot, and Davis, you can jump in here. I think in general, there's, back to your comment, Hal, about the asset light side is attracting a very different type of investor right now. Big problems attract big investment. The supply chain's a dang mess. And so I think an asset light side with technology, the trucking logistics industry is becoming, or maybe already is, a technology industry. That's really what's happening. And so I think that's attracting different talent, different types of investors. And some of those are very bright and know what they're doing, and some of them don't, to be quite honest. And they'll probably take a bath when it's all said and done in terms of their investment in this space. So I think that we're seeing, that's one trend in terms of attracting a broader investment base. The asset heavy side, not so much. I think that what we're seeing on the investment side, we're seeing a lot of investors who have been dedicated to one specialty for a long period of time. Coming out of COVID, one of the trends is they don't want all their eggs in one basket anymore. So they're using acquisitions as, hey, I want to continue to, I love the industry, but I've got to, the trend is to diversify through acquisitions, to spread risk across different specialties. So there's not a scenario like COVID-19 that overnight can be a game over scenario. And I think that for those that, I mean, it really was kind of luck of the draw. Some people, their business was done, and some people, it was the best year or 18 months they've ever had in 40 years in trucking. And it was pure luck, to be honest. And so I think people understand that that's something that they're not going to roll the dice on that again. They want to spread their exposure across different specialties just to manage those risks.
That makes a load of sense. And that really echoes a lot of the things that we've seen from sort of coming in from different sectors. Well, gents, listen, this was a great session, and moreover, a great kind of way to wrap up the series that you guys have done with us this year. We were really excited to do it with you. And as it turns out, it was way better than we thought it was going to be, because I think you really touched on some pressing issues that are really kind of burning questions for a lot of our members. You know, just to give you folks out there a notion of what we covered if you weren't able to make them all. And again, all of these sessions were recorded. They're available on our Education on Demand page on our website. So if you go over to intermodal.org and go to education and then education on demand, they're in there. But just to break it down, we started off the year, and Spencer, you mentioned that report you did. We did sort of a mini session that was kind of based on that, trucking and M&A trends, that sort of kicked this session off and really kind of got us going. Looked back at 2020, but also give us sort of a roadmap to what you guys were looking at for 2021 from this perspective of M&A trends. Then we jumped into 7 best practices for succession planning, which we did in April, which was great, and that had a bunch of great tools in there to kind of get your house in order, and a lot of really good moments that I think some of your character that you were playing on Shark Tank were breaking some of the rules or not rules, but best practices that we covered in that one. How to add a multiple to your company's value, we covered in October, and that one was just jam packed with great insights for anybody really, but particularly if you're in this business. And then obviously we just went through growing through acquisition and protecting your business value. Taken all together, they make a masterclass in business administration for the transportation professional. But especially if you're in that position of wanting to grow through acquisition or transition your business onto maybe the next generation or a new owner, great information. So I can't thank you guys enough. Spencer, just want to kick it back over to you to wrap us up.
Yeah. And again, thanks for everybody that have tuned in, recognize many names that have been here for the whole time. And I hope that this content really plays a role in you guys doing some significant things in your business. And just a compliment to the IANA team, you guys first class. Y'all just really do things right. And in addition to the resources that we have, they have tremendous resources across all topics. And I encourage everyone on here to make sure that you're utilizing those because they are, potentially transformative for your business and for your people. So check them out. Again,
that's at intermodal.org, and go to the education tab and then down to Education on Demand. If you have any other questions for us or for Spencer or Davis, go ahead and send those over to information@intermodal.org, or you can send it to hal@intermodal.org, and I'll get it right over to them. Thanks for joining us at IANA, the moving force behind intermodal freight. Take care now.